Greetings hobbyists, this is Artisans of All, and in this video we're going to be having a look at how to make a combination between mechanical and organic cables. So this is a bit of an old project here, but I thought it would be a good thing to work on. It is a giant stompy robot head, and in the background this can be possessed demonically, meaning that you get these sort of biological entities starting to take over this, and you can start seeing this in this cable here, where we've got the original mechanical part of the cable being slowly grown over by this organic-y looking tube. So what we're going to do is we've got a couple of extra places to put these. Now there are lots of ways of doing this, so we're going to have a look at a couple of them that are going to vary in complexity. So we're going to start with the simpler methods first that are going to use the tools that are native to Blender, and then we'll start having a look at some things with add-ons and some more funky techniques that we can do. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to start this with a curve to base this off of. So I'm going to press Shift and A, Mesh, and I'm going to bring in a curve, and we're just going to use a Bezier curve. I'm going to press G to move that around, so we've got this down here. Now what I'm going to do is come into edit mode, and we want to start moving this around. So I've got, if I press G, one end of the cable here and the other end of it here. With the handles we can just press R to rotate them. It's a lot easier to do this in side view, so I'm going to press G to move that up there, noticing I'm putting it just inside where it's going to end up. I'm going to do the same thing here, and then I want to rotate this around, but you'll notice this actually has some movement on this direction as well, going along the x-axis, which we wouldn't be able to see, so it's always worth panning around. So what I'm going to do is click onto the y-axis there, and I'm just going to press A to select both of them, and then S, which will scale it, and then I'm going to press X because I want this on the x-axis to be effectively having no movement at all, so I'm just going to type in 0, and that's going to make that perfectly flat. Come back to the side axis, and we can start fiddling around with this. So I can just move this around here, and that's going to give me my cable. If I come back onto this, I'm just going to press S to start scaling this curve in. But you're going to notice I want to keep it so that you've got this direction as if it's coming out of this port. Back to the y-axis, and we need to move these around. So let's grab that one. I'm going to press G and X to move it across to this side, and same with that one, G and X. I'm going to try and position this approximately in the middle, and this might actually need to come down slightly, so G and Z. So again, it's in the middle, and that looks much better. So let's start with the basics of this cable. And you can see from this example here, what we've got is one cable going through the middle, and then we've got these outer rings that are being the part of these sort of rubberized cables that allow it to flex. So side view, go into object mode, and if I come down here, you can see the object data properties, which I've already got open. So this is the green symbol, and it looks like a curve. So first thing I want to do is, this is not looking perfectly smooth, and I can change that by upping the resolution. I can just drag that, and you'll notice how much smoother or less smooth it gets depending on which direction I go. I'm going to change this up to 32, so it's going to look pretty smooth. The next thing I want to do is I want to add some thickness to this to make it a cable. We don't have to use any funky programs to do this, so there are some available. I'll show you one in a bit. But we're just going to come down to this geometry tab. Okay, it should look like this when it's closed. Click on it to open it, and we want to have a bevel added. So we're going to add some depth to this bevel, and all I do is drag that across to add this depth to the bevel, and I can change the resolution if I want. If you look here, we can see that this resolution has got 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm pretty sure it's per quarter. So I'm just going to up that to, let's say, 12. That's going to make that look nice and smooth, and I have got this problem that actually that isn't in the middle, so I'm going to go into edit mode again, and then G and Z that up so it looks about right. And you'll notice we can still move this cable around. Now importantly, if I press / to go into isolation mode, you'll notice that this, at the moment, is not a solid. We don't have anything filling in the ends, so we just need to click fill end caps, and that's going to fill in the ends. Now there is a slight problem with this. This doesn't actually merge all these points together, which is really annoying. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to deal with that later, but we'll talk about it when we come to it. / to come out of isolation mode, and we've got this cable. So what I actually want is I want the thick cable here to be what's going to be the start of our sort of fleshy growth that's going to come from, let's say, this end. And then we want a thinner cable that's going to be the heart or the center of our rubberized cable pieces there, our mechanical pieces. So what we're going to do is we're going to make 2 copies of this. So I'm going to press F2, and I'm going to name this organic cable, and then I'm going to press Shift and D to duplicate that, press Escape so it goes back into the same place. I'm going to press F2, you'll notice this named it Organic Cable 001, we're going to call this mechanical cable. Hit enter, and we've got those there. Now what I'm going to do just for now is I'm going to press H to hide the organic cable, and now I've just got the mechanical cable, and I want that to be thinner because we don't want this to be as wide, and we've got these bits here that are going to need to be wider than it. So I'm just going to bring that down. I can always fiddle around with that later. Now the other thing I'm going to do at the moment is you can see the origin is all the way over here. I'm going to press Shift and S, and I'm going to move my origin to the geometry. If you don't have machine tools, which is what I used to do that, just go to Object, Set Origin, and Origin to Geometry, and that will do exactly the same thing. But honestly, I do recommend getting machine tools. It's got wonderful pie menus like this. It also allows you to tab in and out of things very, very quickly, and it's free. Right, next thing, we want to make one of these bits here. We're going to make that from a cylinder, so I'm going to press Shift and A, Mesh, and I'm going to bring in a cylinder. That's massive. So let's start by upping the vertices there. This doesn't look very smooth, so I'm going to up that to 64. That should be enough considering this is going to be quite small. I'm not going to deal with the radius here. I'm just going to press S and scale it down till it looks about right. So let's bring that over here so I can get this scale approximately correct. And what I'm going to do is just bring it up to there so it looks about right. So I'm going to go to, let's say, there. This might actually need to be a little bit smaller, but we'll fiddle with that later. And then what I want to do is I want to make sure that we've got this rounded shape. So first I'm going to press S and Z to make it a little bit thinner. And then I'm going to go into edge mode, press Alt and select the top edge, Shift and Alt and select the bottom edge, and then I can just bevel this. But you'll notice when I press Control and B, this bevel is going to look very weird. It's not really at a 45-degree angle, and that is because we've scaled this on the Z-axis but not on the others, or we've scaled it more on the Z-axis than the others, I should say, because we have scaled it a bit. So if I go to Item here and I go back into Object mode, you can see we've got these scales being uneven, with the Z-axis being smaller than the X and Y. So if I just press Shift and A, I can apply the scale. That's going to go back to 1, go back into edge mode. If you don't have machine tools, that's just pressing tab and pressing 2 or clicking up here. And then I can press Control and B, and now we've got this nice 45-degree bevel. And I can roll my mouse wheel up to add in some curves to that. And I probably want to go to about here. I've got 4 there. Any more than that's going to be a bit excessive at this scale. Let's go back into side view and see how that looks. Yeah, that looks pretty good. As I said, I do think this needs to be made a bit smaller, so I'm just going to come down here to my bevel, and I can just fiddle around with that and make it a little bit smaller, so something about there. Again, we can always come back and change that. Finally, we're going to put this onto this curve, so we're going to use a curve modifier and an array for that. So what I need to do first is make sure that this has its origin at the same place as this. So what I'm going to do is press Shift and S and move my cursor to the selected, like that. If you don't have machine tools, again, it's Object, Snap, and Cursor to Selected. Then I'm going to do the same thing here, Shift and S, and then I want to move this to the cursor just there. So now these both have the origins in the same place. And again, if you don't have machine tools, just go Object, Snap, and then Selected to Cursor. So what this is going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to put this on this curve. So I'm just going to go here to add a modifier, add modifier. I want to use a curve modifier, and I'm going to select this object here, and you'll notice it's there. Now we've got this as a deform axis as X. We want this to be Z because effectively we want it to be in that facing. But normally I just play around with this, and if you just press G and Z, you can move this up and down. So I can move it to there. Now the important bit, and we do have a bit more to do here, but I just want to deal with this first, is if I press G and Z and move further, you'll notice if I come to here where there's more of a turn, that we've got this slight deformation, that we've got this wider part here and a thinner part there. Now, I actually think that's what I want for this. That's where this curving takes place, in these sort of rubberized sections. So I want that to happen. If you decide that you don't want it to happen, there are ways around this that's to do with instancing. I'm putting a link in the top right hand corner where I look at a situation where you're going to want to instance. And there are a number of ways of doing that. And the one in the link is quite a traditional way. You can also do it with geometry nodes. I'm going to cover that at a later date in a different video about how to instance on geometry nodes. So if you're not signed up to the channel, make sure you do that. So G, Z, and I'm going to move that back to about there where I'm my first one of these parts. At this point I can have a look at my central bit. Yeah, that looks alright. Actually, it might want to do a little bit wider. So I'm just going to up my bevel slightly. There we go, that looks about right. And then if I want this to continue along, I can just go to my modifiers and I can just add an array modifier. Now at the moment, this is not going to do much. In fact, it's going to do something over here because it's on the x-axis. We don't want it on the x-axis, so I'm going to put that to 0. We want it because it's going to have to appear below this on the z-axis, so I can just move that to somewhere like there. Now, when I start upping this, you're going to start noticing a problem here. Look, it looks awful because it's not following the curve. And the reason for that is that the curve modifier is happening before the array. If I just grab it there and move it above, you'll notice suddenly it's gone in the opposite direction. So we're going to have to change this from minus 0.9 to just 0.9. And we've got that going correctly. And all I need to do is just up that to about there. And then I can just move this up. Notice this is because there's a fixed count. You can actually do this to fit curve and then click the curve and it will do it there as you want. But notice it's got one that's going inside. I don't really want that, but this is a really useful tool that you can do. I'm going to put this back to fixed count and then I can do this exactly where I want it to be. So let's say there, and then so we don't have this overlap, I'm just going to move my z-axis down slightly. That might be a bit too much. 1.25, 1.27, 1.28. There we go, that's probably about right. Maybe there, 1.29 for me. So there we go, we've got our tube. Now at this point, you'll notice this one is just smooth. That's just because it's been clicked on and you've got shade smooth. So it just looks like that. So you can do that if you want. I'm actually going to bring this back to shade flat just so I can see what's going on with this. So I know what it's going to look like when it's 3D printed. And these faces are small enough that I know at this size, you're not going to see that and it's not going to be a problem. So there we go, that's looking pretty good. We just need to deal with the organic part now, which is going to be coming from the bottom. So let's go to our object outliner and let's unhide the organic cable. And we can see that's just where we want it. And nicely, it is covering, if I press Shift and Z to go into X-ray mode, it is covering the entirety of the cable below it. So that's great, just what I want it to be. So let's deal with our problems that I mentioned about fill caps. So I'm going to press / to isolate this. And then we're going to have a look at this. So what I'm going to do is before we can modify this at all, we need to convert this to a mesh. So I'm going to go right click, convert to and mesh. You can also do this up here in the object menu. So object, convert, and then convert to mesh. So we've got that there. Now if I shift and go into vertex mode, you can see we've got all of these vertices. But if I go to one of these vertices where we've filled our top and press G, you'll notice they are separated. They are not actually connected, which is really annoying. So what I'm going to do is in vertex mode, press A to select everything, M and by distance. And now we've removed 56 vertices, which will be these ones at the top there and the ones at the bottom there. And then I'm going to go back into object mode and this is going to have shaded horribly because it's a curve, or it was a curve. So if I just click on this and then shade flat, we can see what we've got. Now what's great about this is this turned it into a solid, which means that we can start doing things like booleans. And if I only want this bottom part here, I want to delete this top bit. I'm going to press Shift and A, mesh, bring in a cube, rotate it, G to somewhere about there, and then I can just delete this off of this or boolean it away. I could have also done this by deleting certain vertices. I just found this an easier way to do it. My brain has just started to work more with booleans, to be perfectly honest. And as well, if I was using something like hard ops and box cutter, this would take a second. So I'm just going to use ball tools. So click that, shift click there, control and minus, and we've got our cable being cut from it. Let's H to hide that. And over here, I'm going to click apply. If you don't have ball tools, edit, preferences, come here, type in ball, and make sure you've got ball tools activated and then save your preferences down here. That is just an add-on that's part of Blender, but it's kept hidden until you use it. So now we've got access to this geometry, we can start making this look a little bit more interesting and a little bit more organic. So we're going to be sculpting to do that, but the first thing we're going to want to do is start to smooth this out. So I'm going to press Shift and go into sculpt mode, which is just here if you've got machine tools. Otherwise just come up here and go to sculpt mode. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is smooth this out. So we're going to actually remesh this. So to remesh, if you just press Shift and R, this shows you the size of what you're going to be creating in terms of effectively the individual faces. So I want this relatively small, somewhere around I don't know, there. And once I've clicked, I just press Control and R, and it's remeshed it to that size. And if we want to, if I just drag this out so we can see what these are, I can click the smooth brush, press F to up it in size, and I can just start smoothing these bits out. And you'll notice that where we're doing this, it's just making it look a lot nicer, and we can start smoothing these bits here so we look like we have this sort of change from an organic to a mechanical thing. And actually, if we do it to about there, it will merge nicely in with one of these cables. The other option, which is what I did, if we have a look over here, is we can start using something like the grab brush to start moving this around. So if I come to the grab brush here, what I can do is start grabbing an area and start pulling it around. We can add this sort of more jagged, almost like torn shape, or as if it's sort of slowly creeping up the edge, or sort of growing up this mechanical cable. So whichever look you want is entirely up to you. Sort of depends on the purpose of this growth and this organic to mechanical sort of feel. The other thing that we can do is if you want to start adding in a bit more detail, like make it sort of look a little bit like your throat where you've got your bit sticking out where you'd swallow, we can maybe use something like the draw brush and then start adding something like that in, maybe on the side so we can see it. Let's Control and Z to undo that. Maybe something like there. So we've got that going along the side. In fact, I think I want that a little bit down here so it looks a little bit more interesting. And if it comes too far, we can come to the smooth brush, or you can always press Shift while any brush is working to activate the smooth brush. And we've got this sort of coming up there, and we've got this sort of slightly blobby. I do actually quite like that because I think it looks, again, a little bit more organic. So I'm going to keep that somewhere like there, maybe smooth out some of those bits along there. There we go. So we've got our organic cable, and if we want something dipping in, we can just keep with the draw brush, maybe down the strength so that it doesn't dig in as much, and then we can either come here to select minus, in which case it's going to start digging in, maybe a bit too much there, or if we've got it on plus, if you hold Control down, it does the opposite anyway. Maybe I'm just going to do that here. I'm going to press F to make the brush a lot smaller and sort of dig that in a little bit there, just to define that shape a little bit. F to up the brush size, Shift, and I'm just going to smooth that slightly so it's just digging in a little bit. And there we go. I think that just needs a little bit more smoothing there, and we've got our cable going on. So Shift and back into object mode, and we've got this pretty much sorted. Now we are going to need to do the same thing to this cable if we want to print this. So we're going to have to convert it to a mesh and then make sure that we've merged the end pieces. But we do have to apply this first. Otherwise, because this is working off the curve, it's going to go horribly wrong. If I come to the curve, right click and click convert to and the mesh, then you'll see all of my objects have just gone back to here. So if I just undo that, so Control and Z, come to this, either click apply all, there's a link in the top right hand corner if you want to see how you get that option up there, or we can just go apply to that one and then apply to that one. And we've got all these objects being confirmed. So if I go into vertex mode, you can see they all actually exist now. And then right click, convert to and mesh, go into vertex mode, A, M, and by distance. We've removed 56 vertices, and then we've got that there, and we can boolean these together. So to create the second cable, we're going to do something a little bit more detailed, and we're going to play around with an add-on as well, so you can see how that works. So let's come over here, and we're going to start by making, in fact, actually, just to make this exactly the same, I'm just going to bring that in from an older file. So you can see I've just copied that object in there, and it's always worth having those backups so that you can do things like that if you've deleted it. I always seem to manage to delete things that I shouldn't probably be deleting, or apply them before I should be. So we can use Cablerator for this. It's going to make everything nice and fast. Shift-Alt-C to activate Cablerator. This is a paid-for add-on, but I think it's well worth it. Create cable, click there to set the start, click there to set the end, and we've got our cable. It's that fast, and it already looks really nicely shaped. In fact, it's pretty much identical to what I did as my perfect shape. But if we do want to change anything like the tension, we can press D, and that can make it more or less saggy. We can just press S to change the width if we want to. So I'm going to bring that down because we want to have our thinner width. And we can, if I press C, automatically have the caps filled. So we've got that done. The only thing that we've got as a slight issue here is I can't actually add to the resolution here. For example, I can't change that. I do have to, because this is still a curve, come down here and I can do that there. So at the moment it's 20, I'm going to change that to 32 so it's the same, and for our resolution I'm going to up that to 12. But really quick, and what makes it even faster is instead of having to, well, one, put this onto the same origin as this, don't need to worry about that. Click the cable, shift click the thing I want to be arrayed on it, shift alt and C, and then I just need to go to add or edit segment, and there we go. D to offset it, so let's bring it down to somewhere like there, and then I want an array, and you notice it's all said here, so I'm going to press A to add an array. I want to offset my array, so I'm going to press S to move it a little bit, and then I just press C and scroll up to add to my count, and I'm going to get to, let's say, there, click to confirm that, and I'm just going to press S to fiddle around with that just a little bit, so again it's off the side. There we go. So much quicker. Do like Cablerator, I do think it's really worth the extra cost. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing again. We're going to call this with F2, mechanical cable 2, and then I'm going to press Shift and D to duplicate this, and you'll notice I can now press Shift Alt and C, and I can just go to edit cable, and then I can just press S to change the width and make it that thicker width. And I will say you can do that to cables that already exist, and actually this has been a while since I've used this. I had forgotten you can edit the resolution and the bevel resolution here. You just have to do it with the edit cable bit, you don't do it initially, so you can actually do that without coming down here at all. That's me being forgetful. That's just me being forgetful. But if you had made this cable here, you could always use the same tools. You can do it with any cable, so it's really good. Anyway, here we go, F2, and I want to call this organic cable 2. Now at this point I don't really have anything to do. If I press H with this, it's already done. You will notice if I do come over here to the modifier properties that you do actually have modifiers going on here, so you do need to apply these in the same way that we did the last one. For example, if I go to my curve and then convert to a mesh, again it's all going to go wrong. So we do have to do that again. Now I'm not going to do that again just to show you it because that's going to be really boring. What I'm going to do instead is play with this cable, and we're going to use something that we've talked about in a previous video to play around with this shape, and again do something a little bit more maybe fun with this organic shape. So what I'm going to do is actually Shift Alt and C, go to edit cable, and I actually want to bring down this resolution, so I'm going to press F and I can just scroll down to make this somewhere around there. Would that be too much? Let's go with there. So I'm going to leave it to 2. Now don't worry, there is method in my madness here. I'm going to right click, convert to a mesh, and then I'm going to go into edge mode, and you'll notice that we've got all of these different edges. So what I'm going to do is press Shift and X to go into X-ray mode. I'm actually going to press / to go into isolation mode, and you'll notice that when it does this, applies a twist. You can see this twisting effect there. We don't really want this, so let's get rid of that. So I'm going to come back to when this was a curve, Shift Alt C and edit cable, and you can see here we've got our twist method, and if I just press H we can change it to have no twist. Right click, convert to a mesh, and then go to edge mode, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of the edges except for the main, or these sort of circle bits there. Delete and delete edges, and we're left with these. Oh, I should have got rid of that face as well. Oh well, and actually it's not a problem because they're not connected. So I'm going to press Alt to select that, Shift select with Alt each of these. There we go. And I'm now going to press Control E, and I'm going to go to bridge edge loops. And well, what was the point in that? We've basically ended up with the same thing, except we now have this funky option for bridge edge loops. I can now up my number of cuts to bring this back to a smooth shape. But what's more important than that, or what I wanted to play with, is we can now change our profile factor. So we can start fiddling around with these bits here. So we can start making this sort of blobby shape. If I up those to make it look like we've got almost these fluids being, I guess the word would be like swallowed or traveling down this curve. And if I just go out of isolation mode, you can see what that's doing. That's going to look really cool. Now the only problem with this is that once you've clicked off of this, okay, you can press F9 to bring the menu up again to do that. So I can still change this. Now, as soon as I click off of this and go into, let's say, object mode, or select another object and come back to this, if I press F9, you'll notice it doesn't work anymore. So we do have to be a little bit careful with that. Now at this point, I can do the same tricks. I'm just going to go into vertex mode, A, M, and by distance to make sure I've still got those caps. So this is going to be a solid object. I'm going to get rid of some bits at the bottom. I will actually show you how to do this in a different way. So I could do this in vertex mode here. Alt select on that edge there, delete, and then vertices. So we've got rid of the vertices. And then if I just while over the other side, press L, we've got all of these bits, delete, vertices. And then if I just alt select that and then press F to add a face, we've now got just this bit here. And at this point, again, similar idea. I can just go into sculpt mode. I'm going to shift and R. You'll notice that because it's a new object, it's reset this back to what it was in terms of the voxel size. So let's go somewhere like some fine like that. Control and R to apply it. And then let's smooth this out. And again, we can edit how we want this to be. So let's say because we've got this, what can we do here? Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my draw brush, up this, F to make it a bit smaller. What I want to do is I'm actually just going to add something like that, and maybe another bit at the bottom there. In my mind, I'm making something like an Adam's apple. Now I know that's, or I think that's there to protect your voice box. So I'm not sure this is entirely relevant to a giant sort of robot, but either way, I think it would look quite cool to have this sort of sticking out on the side. And if I want to, I can maybe use something like draw sharp, F, make that a bit smaller, maybe down the strength a bit, and potentially sort of make that a little bit more exaggerated, something around there. That was an awful stroke, somewhere around there, and then smooth that out a little bit. I'm doing this currently with my mouse and not using my tablet, which is why having a tablet is a great thing for this. I'll actually put a couple of links to tablets in the description so you can have a look at some ones, or one that's relatively cheap and another one that's more expensive, but it is very, very good. There we go. Cool. Do I like this double bit? Not sure. Let's get rid of that. There we go. So we've got that there on that one. We can do the same thing on the second one if we want to. But again, a nice looking alternative and something that's sort of more meshing into the mechanical cables there. So there we go. Just a couple of ways of making these mechanical shifting into organic type of cables. One with these nice sort of pulsating bits that look particularly grim, and another one that's a little bit more simple, but you can still add some detail in with your sculpting. So I hope you found that useful. I do especially enjoy that bridge edge loops technique, and maybe you'll find a different use for that on one of your projects. As always, if you do, I really look forward to hearing from people on the channel, so please do put something in the comments section. It's great to see what people are doing, and my Instagram handle is at the bottom. Again, it's lovely to be tagged in to see what people are doing. That way I get to see what's coming from the channel. Have a great day, guys.